and sustainable transport, we must also prepare for the challenges that come with managing the waste generated by these technologies at their end of life. From lithium-ion batteries in electric vehicles to solar panels and wind turbine components, the region faces unique logistical, environmental, and policy-related hurdles in ensuring safe and sustainable disposal and recycling. As EVs and renewable energy systems become more widespread across the region, we must ensure that their disposal and recycling are handled responsibly, sustainably, and in ways that protect both our environment and communities. Today's session will explore the current landscape of e-waste management in the region, emerging best practices and technologies for handling end-of-life EVs and renewable energy systems, and policy frameworks for regional collaboration opportunities. We are honored to have with us experts in the field who will guide us through these topics. Today's session will be moderated by Mr. Antonio Silly, who is a registered professional engineer with a decade of experience in the sustainable energy sector. He brings a wealth of knowledge, having started his career as a graduate engineer in Barbados' beverage manufacturing industry, focusing on EE for utilities like steam, hot water, CO2, and electricity. Antonio would have also served 5 years at the Barbados Power and Light Company as a system engineer in the Customer Solutions Department, where he was instrumental in pioneering programs in electric mobility, distributed battery storage, and other sustainable initiatives. Antonio has also played a key role on the implementation committee for Barbados' first electric bus project and later ventured into independent consultancy. His projects include managing the commissioning of an upgraded public EV charging network in Barbados and conducting feasibility studies for electrifying the government EV fleet in Barbados and introducing electric buses in Jamaica. Currently, he is the Regional Electric Mobility Advisor for GIZ, working on the NDC Tech project, which is an initiative aimed at promoting sustainable transport across the region, with partners like UWI, CCRI, CDB, and Climate Analytics. Joining us as our keynote speaker is Ms. Angelica Zapata, who is a consultant project manager at Black Forest Solutions. We do hope that their insights today will help us with a better understanding of the opportunities and challenges that lie ahead. I will now hand the floor over to you, Antonia. Please proceed. Thank you.
Hi, good morning, colleagues. Can you hear me well? Just doing a quick test. Okay, great. I see the
Yes.
thumbs up there. Okay, thank you, Brian, for that introduction. And thank you guys for joining us this morning for webinar number 2 in this webinar series for CARICOM Energy Month. As Brian indicated, the theme for this year is Invest, Innovate, and Sustain, leading the charge in renewable energy frontiers. And today we have a very interesting topic for you, and is one that comes up quite often when we're having the discussions around electric mobility and renewable energy transition. Persons often ask, so how are we going to handle these new technologies at the end of life? You know, if this is something that we're doing for sustainability, we must take consideration to the full life cycle. And today, I think we have a good presentation to help answer some of those questions with some specific case studies for the region. So the issue of end-of-life management is an important topic, and it comes up quite often, as I mentioned. So before we start, I just wanted to go through a few ground rules before I do the introduction of our esteemed presenter. So we'll be doing it 40 to 45 minutes of presentation, and then the remaining 15 to 20 minutes, questions and answers. We ask persons to either write their questions in the chat while Angelica is presenting, and we have colleagues monitoring the chat as well as the social media channels where the webinar is being live streamed. And then after the presentation, we will open up for questions and answers on Zoom. So we ask persons to raise their hands, and we would take on the questions in a chronological order. Just to set a little background, NDC Tech is a regional energy and transportation project being implemented in 5 countries. As Brian indicated, it's being co-implemented by GIZ as well as other partners in the region, such as Climate Analytics, University of West Indies, CDB, and so on. And we have been working for the last 2 years in various areas. This is one component. So we have pilot projects. We also have been helping the countries with the NDC revision, but this is a particular component under Output 2, which looks at enabling frameworks. And this is a topic that we think is very important. So GIZ, through our project, would have procured consultant Black Forest Solutions. And this is a company with great experience in waste management in numerous capacities. They're involved in transfrontier shipping of waste, operations of waste facilities, and also technical consultancy. So this will fall under the technical consultancy component. And today we have our guest, Angelica. Angelica has been the project manager for this assignment with NDC and she's been doing an excellent job working with all the countries and partners and stakeholders. So we commend her on that. Angelica Zapata is a Colombian chemical engineer who obtained a master's degree in Germany in air quality control, solid waste, and wastewater process engineering. For over 7 years, she's been working in the manufacturing, research and development, and environmental consultancy sectors. She's passionate about the exploring and building in collaboration with local stakeholders solutions for e-waste management that are customized to the local conditions in the global south. So thank you, Angelica, for joining us, and thank you for also supporting us through this project. I would like to say before Angelica starts that we have the final report for this assignment. It's currently in the review process. And once that becomes available, we will also disseminate that and share that with all interested persons and make the links available. So thanks, Angelica, and over to you to lead us through the presentation component.
Thank you, Antonio. Thank you, team. I am really glad to have the opportunity to present the results of this project with you. Let me share my screen. Okay, so good morning, everyone. So basically today we are gonna present the consolidated results and methodology that we follow to execute the project called End-of-Life Electric Vehicles, Battery and Renewable Energy E-Waste Management in 3 flagship countries, Grenada, Jamaica, and St. Lucia. We started this project back in December, and today will be like the official closing meeting presenting the results. Just a quick introduction to Black Forest. We are a German company founded back in 2016, and we are basically focusing on transfrontier treatments of hazardous waste. We have conducted more than 275 projects over more than 115 countries. And we are really, really passionate to provide solutions and generate impact where it's highly needed, that it's the global south. So the agenda that we are going to follow today is I would like to share with you what was the objective of this assignment and the methodology that we follow. And then the first work package of this assignment was related to stock taking and assessment of markets in the 3 countries to basically establish the baseline analysis condition. The third point will be the framing and contextualization of needs for action, that basically here we identify the targeted components to prioritize along the project. Then we will briefly talk about the best available techniques and practices to manage these components at the end of their life. And we also conduct an assessment of which of these available techniques and practices are most applicable to the flagship country conditions. Then based on this, we propose country-specific roadmaps for the environmental management of this type of waste. And finally, we would like to share with you what's the long-term vision that we have for the countries, especially working as a region. So starting with the objectives, basically what we aimed with this project was to provide policy guidance to stakeholders within the 3 flagship countries regarding the environmental management of these components, meaning not just to disposing of them, but also how to think in preventing that these kind of components to become a waste. No, then we need to think in recycling, reuse, repurposing, and how to handle these e-waste in a proper manner. So, and then with this, we aim to offer recommendations applicable to the countries, because it's not like we are gonna take what it's been doing, what it's done in Germany and say, okay, you do the same grenade, that doesn't work that way. With an emphasis on this new and future challenge due to the forecasted increased uptake of these systems, because it's a reality that day by day there are going to be more EVs and renewable energy systems entering the countries, no? So how we did this, we started by conducting a market assessment and evaluating the waste management practices in the 3 flagship countries. We conducted stakeholder interviews. I will let you know with whom. Then we conduct an inventory of the major components and prioritize them based on the level of risk and the severity of inaction. Then based on this, we also identify, consolidate all the best available techniques and environmental practices to handle these components, but also to reuse them, to repurpose them, and to recycle them. And then we evaluate their applicability within a SITS context. Then based on this, we propose the country recommendation, one per country. And then we present these roadmaps in an on-site mission that we conducted in July. And in these on-site missions, we visited some of the facilities, some of the stakeholders, we spoke with them, we present to them the proposed roadmap, and then we build together with them, we refine the roadmap, and then we share with them a final refined roadmap applicable for each of the countries. Basically, in each country, we engage with waste management private operators, with the solid waste management authorities. In the specific case of Jamaica, they also have the National Environment and Planning Agency, that they are the ones focusing hazardous waste management. We also spoke with Basel Convention focal points, with the electricity service operators in the countries, to map and really understand their needs. So what did we find regarding the EV market in each of the countries? Well, if we go back, for example, in the case of Grenada, back to 2021, the penetration of EVs in the market was minimum. For example, the first EVs that were introduced in the country were back in 2015, during a pilot project. But now if we check, for example, last year, there were 52 EVs and 1,361 hybrids between new and used vehicles that were imported into the country. When we look into St. Lucia, the numbers are a little bit higher. But if we think, for example, back to 2019, there were only 23 EVs registered. But back in last year, there were 1,807 between hybrids and electrical vehicles that were imported into the country, representing 40% of the total vehicles imported into the country. Whereas for Jamaica, back in 2018, there were only 10 EVs registered. And back in March 2022, 150 EVs had been registered into the country. Regarding the renewable energy sectors, all of the 3 countries rely on fossil fuels to produce their electricity. And that's why they have ambitious targets, especially Grenada has a policy target aiming for a 100% renewable electricity generation by 2030. Whereas in the case of St. Lucia and Jamaica, the target is of 50%. Also, when we check the current installed capacity, Grenada has 10% of its installed capacity comes out of renewable energy system. Renewable energy for St. Lucia, it's 6%, and for Jamaica, it accounts for 11%. But something interesting about Jamaica is like they have energy storage capacity installed, and also has an install. It's the home of the largest wind energy plant in the Caribbean, that it's the Wigton Wind Farm. No? And based on this, we set a gap analysis. No? And for the gap analysis of the 3 countries looks slightly similar. We separate in 4 big clusters. One is the regulatory gaps. One, it's like the financial instrument that we highly recommend to be an EPR. Another one is the infrastructure gaps, and then the stakeholder gaps. And in general, in the 3 countries, we noticed that the Waste Management Act lacks specific provisions for these new emerging waste streams. Also, there are no specific landfill regulation to accept or restrict the entering of this kind of components into the landfills, for example. There is no legal provision regarding end-of-life planning or take-back clauses in import contracts of this kind of new systems. There are no standards or guidelines to manage handling this type of waste. Regarding EPR, there is no built-in EPR regulation for any kind of waste category in general. And there is no real financial mechanism to support the waste management system. And there are no reporting obligations for producer, importers, retailers. Therefore, there is not a mass balance in each of these 3 countries. There is no traceability system for the ownerships. Regarding infrastructure, as we may know, there is no proper storage of hazardous waste, no packaging, labeling, or transport protocols for this type of waste. Damaged panels and batteries are most likely landfill or stockpile without proper tracking. There is no formal take-back schemes, no recycling or refurbishing or reusing facility in the countries, no differentiate tipping fee at the landfill to promote a prevention over disposal, for instance. And regarding the stakeholders gap, we noticed that there is a lack of training for waste operators handling this type of waste. The public awareness regarding e-waste and hazardous waste is way lower than for plastic waste, for instance. The communication is informal and fragmented. There is no strong collaboration between the stakeholders, and also in the universities and vocational centers, they have not really integrated this type of waste management into the curricula. There are some differences in St. Lucia, for example. Some of the stakeholders mentioned that there is voluntary EPR practices in paper for some selected brands, for example, the German brand BMW, but these come from the corporate policies of BMW rather than from the country. And also, when we check Jamaica, they do not have EPR regulation, but they are drafting it. We will discuss about it. They also mentioned that Porsche and Audi, again, German brands, require EPR frameworks before selling EVs into Jamaica. So they actually requires some of the dealerships to have in place end-of-life battery management, at least in paper. There are some private take-back schemes or collection points, but they are not really communicated to the citizens properly in Jamaica. For example, there is a really interesting private exporter of these batteries that is actively seeking to collaborate with universities in terms of research and development, but this is not a spread practice in the countries. And actually this exporter particularly, it's also pursuing an international certification, but this is an voluntary action rather than a mandatory action within this kind of stakeholders. Now, regarding the framing and contextualization of the need for actions, here we basically conducted an inventory of all the components, the major components within the different kinds of electrical vehicles, hybrid, plug-in, and so on, and also the renewable energy system, considering the solar panels and the wind generation system, because they are mostly the ones that exist, and the wind one actually just applies to Jamaica. And we assess these, we prioritize these components in order to select the ones to be our priority along the project. And we develop this methodology to assess these components, considering what is the material market value of these components, what are the required recycling infrastructure, if this will require national or international recycling facilities, what are the consequences for inaction in case that we don't manage these components properly in a safe manner way, what is the circularity and reparability of these components, and the last one is the risk mitigation feasibility. So basically what we get after applying this evaluation methodology, that actually each of these chapters that we are developing along the presentation, they all have their deliverables along the project, the specific reports. When you want to check the methodology in detail, this may be available for you through Antonio, but this is just the summary. So when we check the findings regarding the electrical vehicle systems, it is clear that the priority number one component out of this system is the lithium-ion batteries. Why? Because of their high risk of explosion if they are unstable due to an accident and so on. And also they contain highly valuable materials that are of high interest for the industry, and they require to be exported to international facilities with the know-how and infrastructure to manage properly and recycle these materials. The second priority will be the high voltage electronic subsystems, such as the inverters, the DC-DC converters, and the onboard chargers that are within this kind of vehicles. Why? Because they contain metals that are highly valuable for the industry. This is a standardized recycling procedures because it's mainly scrap, and they also may contain residual charge that could cause short circuits. So they still require some know-how in how to properly disassemble and prepare for exportation. No? Now, when we think regarding the renewable energy systems, again, the priority number one is the storage capacity batteries. No, here we have in some systems lithium-ion batteries, in others the lead acid batteries, and on the other hand, the second priority is on the panels itself, because they contain like materials such as aluminum that there is a standard recycling procedures. But on the other hand, these panels, because of their particular nature, as they are like sandwich, they have like letters, they require to be recycled into international facilities, mostly located in the global north. And there are some panels that actually contain hazardous heavy metals, like such as the one containing cadmium. But as far as we identified during the interviews with the importer of solar panels into these three flagship countries, most of the panels are monosilicon, crystalline silicon panels, rather than the ones which may contain cadmium. So regarding the available techniques and environmental practices, this is a super summary. Like basically here in this deliverable, we summarize all the international best practices, all the international conventions, United Nations guidelines, and so on, to manage the targeted components. So the first one, what we will discuss was the batteries. So as we may know, there are some requirements and difference when you are handling, for example, lithium-ion batteries or nickel batteries that are, for example, in the hybrids, or the lead acid batteries for the storage of renewable energy. No? So for instance, the lithium-ion batteries, due to their fire risk, they require to be stored in proper secured bins. And also, in case that a battery is unstable or damaged, this battery should be isolated. And the nickel batteries should be separated from the lithium batteries. Also, since its electrolyte is alkaline, you may require acid neutralizer availability. Regarding the lead acid batteries, there is by Basel Convention at least a battery drainage prohibition. Where you are collecting this type of batteries, you need to have available an alkaline neutralizer in case that there is a split of the acid, you can neutralize it. Regarding the storage, your facility should be separated by zones. You cannot mix the different type of hazardous waste. There is a matrix to know which type of waste can be mixed with which. Also, you may need quarantine areas, you need emergency fire response, you need to have your space with proper air circulation, escape routes. You also need to have the kit to manage any spill from the acid. Regarding the packaging, it depends on the type of battery and the size of the battery, and they are UN approved leak-proof plastic containers for this type of batteries. Regarding the lead acid batteries, for instance, you may use rigid outer packaging or wooden slated crates or pallets with certain specifications. Now, regarding the labeling, you need to specify which kind of battery is. There are, again, United Nations regulations for the transport of dangerous goods, and also you need to follow the globally harmonized systems for the labels, and the transportation, it depends on if you are transporting them via road, rail, or sea, or if you are transporting them by air, for example, then you will need to follow the IATA rules. I don't know if you may notice that, for example, when you are getting into the airplanes now, they always require that if you have your computer, your cell phone, that it's always with you in the carry-on luggage, because they may generate a fire during the flight, and that's why you need to have it on a place that you can see it in case that there is a fire, and you can respond to it quickly, no? And that's the biggest risk with the lithium-ion batteries. Now, when we think regarding repurposing or recycling, how do we know when the battery comes to the end of its life, or it can be used for a second life? Where there is certain parameters, and the biggest one, the main one, is when it depends on your battery capacity, no? So when your battery capacity is about 80%, your battery is on its first life, and it's when it's typically used for electric vehicles. But when the battery goes below 80 and on 60%, this battery enters into the group of second life application, where it is mostly used for stationary energy storage. And when it's below 60%, then this battery is considered optimal for recycling, because its capacity is no longer sufficient for reuse or repurposing applications, no? So now when we see the technologies required to recycle these batteries, there are mainly three. One is the pyrometallurgic, that is highly intense technique, because you basically smelt the metals and so on, and then you reduce the carbon to recover the valuable materials. The second one is the hydrometallurgy, with basically you leach your battery using chemicals. This is a water intense activity. Then you separate the metals to recover the materials. And the third one is like the mechanical recycling, that you need to deactivate your battery, disassemble, process it, and recover the electrolyte, for example, with lithium and so on. This is an interesting map because it shows like where are mostly the lithium batteries recycling facilities currently located, no? And unfortunately, if we see, they are mostly located in the global north, which make us maybe infer that it might be economically feasible for seeds context to invest in such infrastructure locally, at least at the short term. Now, when we move to if you remember, another of the prioritized components is the so-called high voltage electronics subsystems of the vehicle, meaning the inverters, the converters, the onboard chargers, and so on. And here, one of the best international standards to look to is the European Union directive. Here in the EU, there are one specific directive for the full vehicles as such are the end of life. There is another one specific for the high voltage batteries, electric vehicles batteries. But when one part of the vehicle that is not the battery is disassembled out of the vehicle, then it's treated separately as a waste, and then it's considered waste electrical and electronic equipment, and then it's covered under the WEEE EU directive. Now, regarding the panels, basically what we need to consider here is like they need to be collected in a ways that we use cover and weather resistance, that they are collected in a weather resistance facilities. We need to collect them and transport it in a way that we avoid to break the panel. We need to separate it from other WEEE kind of ways, especially the ones that are hazardous from the ones that are non-hazardous. We also need to consider some accumulation time limits regarding the packagings. We used to use packaging materials to minimize the shock and vibrations. The same happen when we are considering for the transportation. We must to secure the panels for the transportation. And regarding the solar panel reuse, this is a controversial topic regarding the second-hand market, because a trend that has been becoming popular is like from these global north economies that they started to use solar panels and so on before, than us in Latin America, for example. When now that these solar panels are reducing their power generation capacities, some of them are being exported to global south countries. And basically, this can be seen as a good practice, but at the end, what they are doing is to getting rid of the problem, because anyway, we in Latin America, then we will need to invest in the infrastructure to install these panels on our roof. That has a cost. And then you will need more panels to achieve the generation of the same capacity, and your panels will last 5-10 years instead of 20-30 years. And then this will become a fast e-waste generated stream that we in Latin America, unfortunately, don't have the capacity to properly handling this type of waste. So, and again, the recycling of these solar panels is high tech so far, and even is not that highly standardized as the one for lithium-ion batteries, because as we see here, the solar panels are basically a sandwich, a composite materials of many layers, out of which the easier to recycle is the aluminum frame and the glass. But then how you separate the actual solar cells, no? So then usually what it's done is like the solar panels are treated, and then if they are the silicon ones, then the metals are removed by adding current separators, and then you separate the glass and silicon mechanically. In the case of the cadmium solar panels, then you have a chemical film removal to remove the panels out of the glass and out of the polymers that are used to encapsulate the solar cells. And then you, by ion exchange, you precipitate the cadmium and the tellurium out of the solar panel. So again, if we look to a map to where are the recycling facilities for solar panels located, they are again mostly in the global north. So we say, okay, let's assess each of these best available techniques and environmental practices based on these 8 criteria. No, we consider some economic criterions, technological criterions, and environmental criterions. As a baseline, the main recommendation is that each country should have at least an interim storage in compliance with the Basel Convention. That should be a must. And up to then we start thinking, okay, what about the export? And you may say, okay, but this is already happening. Yes, based mainly for lead acid batteries, but because when you check the Basel Convention annual reports of the countries, there are no official reports that lithium-ion batteries or nickel batteries are being exported so far, just the ULAB. Then we thought, okay, what about establishing, reusing, or repurposing at a local context in the country itself? And what about thinking in establishing a recycling facility in the country? As expected, the only feasible solution at a short term is to have a proper interim storage following the Basel Convention, the Basel Convention standards, and establish a proper export system of these e-waste components. So now, based on this, we understood first the conditions in the countries, then what is the ideal scenario and how it may apply to our local context. And based on all this information, we propose and we build together with the stakeholders country roadmaps, basically focusing on 4 areas. One is the regulatory framework, focusing in e-waste regulation, but also in financial instruments such as environmental levies or ideally EPR. Then a second component is the collection and take-back logistics. A third one is standard and custom control, because most of these components, all of these components are import. So we need to ensure that what is entering our countries is of the highest quality possible. And last is the infrastructure and resource pillar. So basically in the regulatory framework, each of the countries is different. But in the case of Grenada and St. Lucia, both they have their waste management acts, and none of them really include a specific provision for this new emerging type of waste. So that's a first thing to amend in their regulatory framework. In the case of Jamaica, it's a little bit more advanced, and they have their natural resource hazardous waste control of transboundary movement regulation. That is the one that NEPA enforced, and they have more clearer provisions, but they are not in the faculty of issue SOPs and enforce them regarding handling and so on. That it's something to improve. And they also have a pretty good national electrical vehicle policy, including end-of-life management principles, circular economy principles, and minimum operational standards. Now the idea will be that they incorporate this kind of inputs and safety standards, but to their national renewable energy policy, no? And also regarding financial instruments, Grenada has an environmental levy act that they are using, but it will be idea that this is extended to cover batteries, no? At least batteries, and ensuring that this level will support the cost recovery for the environmental management of these batteries. In Grenada, they were not that open to start thinking in an EPR concept, whereas in St. Lucia, yes, it was the case. They would like to develop and implement a national EPR framework to shift the responsibility of end-of-life management of these components to the producers and importers. And In the case of Jamaica, they are already drafting their EPR provisions within the e-waste regulation. Regarding the second pillar, that is the collection and take back logistics, we thought in the same three activities for the three countries. One is to generate a standardized collection protocols for the safe and efficient collection from the consumers, that you as a citizen knows how to handle your battery when it comes to the end of the life. And you as an official collection point, you know how to store it, how to case that it happened. It is also required to fund a national public awareness campaign because, as I mentioned previously, unfortunately, civilians are not that aware of the hazards that they can have in their own houses, no? And also at the end, the goal will be to establish a take-back schemes because this is also important if we want to think in an EPR at the future. The third pillar is the standards and custom controls. And here is important to think in require to the importers to declare minimum quality specifications, to declare the lifespan, especially in the case of importing used components or systems, and certain documentation standards. It is important to require to importers to disclose the expected useful lives and how they plan to manage or return these kind of components when they come to the end of their life. Also, we need to start preparing and developing SOPs for the handling of these components, meaning for the labeling, for the packaging, to handle, to store it, to export these kind of components. We should require all the importers, exporters, and handlers of these kind of components to submit detailed data on quantities entering, moving through the countries, and leaving the countries, because then with this data, we will be able to digitize and compile this into a national mass balance. That this will eventually make it easier for the Basel Convention Focal Point to prepare their annual reports. For instance, Grenade currently is not submitting the annual reports to the Basel Convention, though they are signatory. The three countries are signatory of the Basel Convention. And the last one, it will be interesting that the region start thinking in a cooperative way. And actually, this is something that it's allowed under the Basel Convention in the Article 11. There can be established multilateral or bilateral agreements to facilitate the legal movements and in compliance with the Basel Convention of hazardous waste. No? And the last pillar is the infrastructure and resources. In the case of defined final disposal and export criteria, Jamaica considers that they already have this pretty clear. So this is just for St. Lucia and Grenade, that it's important to establish component should be stabilized or landfill or reused or refurbished or repurposed or exported for treatment. This may include, for example, the battery state of health as a criterion. And also there should be a way to establish the gate fee to promote a prevention over disposal. For the three countries, then, it's advisable to focus first on strengthening their existing infrastructure, meaning to map and improve the conditions, the working conditions of the garages, repair workshops, waste operators, and exporters that are currently handling these components. Then it will be interesting if a feasibility study can be conducted either at a national level or even better at a regional level due to the volumes that are managed now of these kind of components. What to consider in this feasibility study? If is it feasible to establish a local or regional pretreatment facility, or a repurposing facility or a second life facility for these components, no? Another activity is to create technician upcycling programs, and this should cover lithium-ion battery safety, photovoltaic module diagnosis, basic state of health testing, that this is key for the new amendment of the Basel Convention enforced in January of this year, where there is a clear distinction between use and waste. And at last, it is required that at least each country should have a Basel Convention compliant interim storage facility to aggregate their hazardous waste. What we think it could be a really interesting long-term vision for the region, it's to think in a regional export aggregation hub, and this is actually already happening in other areas of the world where the conditions are different, are similar to ours in the Caribbean. For instance, in the Pacific Island countries and territories, they are applying a scheme called Hub and Spoke, where basically they identify sub-regions serving as collection point to subsequently send these collected waste to nearby countries with the processing infrastructure, such as Indonesia, Australia, New Zealand. And they have achieved a really interesting partnership with a freight carriage company called Swear Shipping, called the Moana Taka Partnership. And this company is providing pro bono, it means free shipping on the mainline routes of the company from the Pacific countries to recycling markets within the Pacific Rim. So these are the eligible waste categories that they are collecting, and these are the 15 countries that are within the agreement, and this freight carriage company is carrying this hazardous waste and bringing, for example, to the US, to Australia. Here there are more resources. It's a really interesting partnership. Then we thought, okay, who could be a hub for our context in the Caribbean, no? And when we check the numbers, Trinidad and Tobago move a really interesting volume of hazardous waste, in general hazardous waste, over the last decade. If we compare with the second country that follows, that is St. Lucia, the difference is of more than 100 times the difference. And then we thought, okay, it could be interesting that Trinidad and Tobago could add as a regional hub, because then this will allow the region to lower the per ton export cost. You will be able to have more attractive logistic deals with environmental zone management disposal options. And also, for example, there are already some facilities that are receiving these lithium-ion batteries for recycling. For instance, Costa Rica is receiving imported lithium-ion batteries, and they are recycling these batteries in their country. And also going further, for example, in the Indian Ocean Iceland, they are thinking in an EPR at a regional level, no? And this is in summary what we developed during the project. I am really glad to have the opportunity to present this summary. And as I mentioned, this is just a summary. All the supporting material may be available through Antonio. But yeah, thank you very much. Now I am really glad to hear some questions.
Thank you very much, Angelica. Very good presentation. I think you did a good job of summarizing the interventions and activities that we did under this assignment. I think it is very important. I like the reference to other areas who have come together and collaborated in trying to handle it in a regional forum. I think it's quite fitting, given that this is CARICOM Energy Month, that we have some conversation around that entire regional effort. So I've seen a few questions, but I'll start off the ball with a question there with respect to this regional idea. What key things do you think would be required for us to actually get this done? Do we need to get more countries to be signatories of the Basel Convention first? That might be the first step. And then, what does that effort look like? Is it a meeting of the key stakeholders and agree on the contribution? Do we need to negotiate with private sector? Just speak a little bit on what you think would be important in getting that regional system in place.
Thank you, Antonio. I think one of the first measure is like a basic measure is to have a proper interim storage. That I will say it's the first step to each country to properly at least aggregate their volumes, because there are some of the countries that even can just aggregate one container per year, and that's why instead of thinking in a grenade exporting their individual waste, that it will be super costly, and the agreement that it can sign with a recycler facility will not be cost effective for grenade. That's why I think it is important to start thinking in a regional way, and first it will be necessary to sit down as a community, as a region together, and understand what are the needs, because some of the countries that have higher exportation power and infrastructure, they actually do not see the benefit for them in doing this, because basically they will be doing this to help the smaller countries. So this is an idea that did need to be agreed and proposed in a way that it benefits both sides, the hub and the spokes. But this will require of thinking as a region rather than individuals, but this will first start by coming together as actors into one table.
Okay. Thanks for that. Just to follow up on that whole discussion point, from what you're seeing in the global north, what is the percentage of the state or government being involved versus private sector? Because I saw you spoke a little bit earlier on the financial instruments to make these things happen, but I'm curious as to what you're seeing. Is the government in Germany and Europe and these places the key actors, or is it companies like Black Forest that is doing this based on the financial instruments and regulations, making it viable to have a private sector involvement? Because, of course, governments may do things for the greater good, but the private sector is mainly going to do it if there's some profit or incentive to do it. What ratio are you seeing in North America and Europe as it relates to the involvement of private sector versus government in this area?
Well, I will say that here in the European Union, everything comes, in the beginning, like when this waste change mindset actually came from the civilians, and but this is regarding, for example, municipal solid waste, that the civilians came aware of their hazardousness of not properly handling their waste, and actually this started to be promoted and asked by the civilians. But I feel that this is why here people have a higher awareness of the hazards that with them they deal in their households, and then they start pressuring their governments to take actions. So that's what I think one first step is, to really promote self-awareness from our civilians, to start pressuring our governments to take real actions. And then here in the European Union, they are really high strict compromises that brings together the private sector. The one point that is really interesting is that when we start thinking as an EPR concept, then the waste management operators get interested, not the producers, of course, because this will be something that will cost to them to implement. But the waste management operators, then they want to get into the discussion, because then they will get one part of the cake, no? But I think apart from strengthening our regulatory framework from the government, it is important that us as a civilians, we are empowered and request better conditions and higher quality standards from the producers, no? Because at the end, they are putting the problem in our market, but also us as a civilians, we need to be conscious about our consumption practices, no?
Okay, thank you very much for that. I see we have a question from Mr. Hussein. Please unmute and intervene. Please go ahead.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Good morning, Mr. Antonio. Hussein here. I think we met back in St. Lucia on the electric vehicle training. You raised a very good question there, which actually got me curious to know about young persons in energy, as to how to get involved in these recyclable materials or even upcycle materials. I mean, in the Caribbean, there's a lot of countries, and there would be persons, whether it's in environmental or economics, or maybe like me in the energy sector, who would like to contribute towards saving the earth, as in this area that we're talking about. How would we find or get some sort of cooperation moving on to this challenge?
Okay, thank you for that question. And I guess, Angelica, do you have any insights on what's happening in Europe to address this? How is this being handled on that side?
So before the answer, and you were there in the closing ceremony at Sir Arthur Lewis, and as the principal even mentioned about getting on to the future with electric vehicles.
Yeah.
There are some aspect of electric vehicles could either be upcycled or maybe recycled at some point in time. So it would have been good enough to know that even the technicians on the ground could be able to even contribute to support this initiative as well, which could be part of the training also.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think you covered a very critical part. Yeah, we focus a lot on the training side. We focus a lot on introducing persons into the maintenance and repair and that sort of stuff of the technology, but we didn't do a big emphasis on how to handle it at the end of life. So that was a good point. I think Angelica did highlight that in her presentation, that one of the gaps on the stakeholder side was that the curriculum does not pay a good emphasis on that side. So we do a lot of work where we try to introduce the technology to persons, but we don't quite pay a big emphasis on opportunities for handling it at the end of life. But I was just curious, Angelica, do you see a lot of training for hybrid and electric repair technicians, including that component in other places? Is it something that is greater emphasis in the global north?
I will say yes, that here there is like a standardized curriculums because here one of the main goals is to have high specialized human resources, no? And that's why one of the proposed activities that we consider is required for the Caribbean is start investing in the people, in the technicians to proper handling these kind of components at the end of life. Things as basic as how to discharge safely the battery, no? For instance, what to do in case of an acid leakage. So this is something that it's key to start investing, and I think here in Europe, this is highly standardizing which kind of skills should the technicians have to even access to start working with these kind of components. Unfortunately, in our countries is most based on demand. So we already have the waste here, and you are already working in the in the e-waste scrapper, then you go and try to figure out how to deal with the battery. But here is the other way around, no? They first train the people, and then once they are certified, they can get access to start working with this kind of components, for instance.
Thank you very much. I see we have another question from Sean Bull. Please go ahead with your question.
Hi, thank you much. I want to follow because as I travel the Caribbean region and by extension the Latin American region, I see quite a proliferation of electric vehicle companies and dealers and all of that. But something even having discussions with my colleagues is the matter of who will service these things. And I heard the intervention before, but I want to know, when will we start? Are we planning to start? Because I mean, you don't want to make an investment and something happens and we're unable to service manage the investment. It will leave bitter taste in somebody's in the purchasers and the consumer, because these are significant investments. Whether the brand, most of the brands that we see are coming out of China, you know. So what is the plan? I hear the conversation, but what is the plan to now start getting competent people, competent technicians on the ground that understands the basic technology, the basic servicing, so on and so forth. I mean, we already have challenges across the region, given the geographical setup of our countries, not having charging stations and so on. But we want to see how we can reduce not having technicians who are competent, or enough technicians who are competent to service and provide assistance for the EVs. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you very much for your question. I'll start off by saying that, well, some of it has already started. We have started training of numerous persons under this NDC Tech project. So we had numerous workshops already looking at in various countries under this project. We've also worked closely. The University of West Indies was leading this component on our project, looking at the development of an occupational standard. So we have developed a standard in conjunction with CANTA, the regional training agency, for level 3 and level 4 hybrid and electric vehicle repair. So this standard has now been developed. So now it's a case of getting either at the CARICOM level or the national level to adopt that standard, where we can have now NVQs, National Vocational Qualifications, or Caribbean or CARICOM vocational qualifications. So the work has started, and some of the training has already started from this project and other projects that have already started across the region. But again, this is something that will continuously need more training to be done. So it's something that it's project basis. There has to be facilities in place for continuous training, and that's where the vocational qualification comes in, because we feel as though by developing that now, it can enable some of the community colleges and the TVET councils to be able to build course material on that content. So it's a continuous process, but it has started, and it can always be more.
Sorry to jump in. Sorry to jump in,
if
but
I may,
is it possible for us to start dealing with promotion and communicating that so people know where to go? Because I mean, thank you, I'm learning that it started, but we don't want to know where to go. Who does it? You know, if we collectively, if we could have like a repository of technicians, or I don't know if you call them mechanics, so people can know in the interim while we build on the stock. Sorry to have just jumped in like that.
Sorry about that. Yes, it's probably definitely, thanks for that intervention, but it's definitely probably a communication issue in terms of bringing to the forefront what is being done. Obviously, persons like myself working in this space would be more aware of what has been done and what is ongoing. But again, yes, it's always important to have that communication to further share what has been done and what is being planned. And I'll take our next question. I think Nissa, followed by Kareem, then Mr. Hussein again. So Nissa, come in with your intervention, please.
Antonio, good morning, colleagues. It's more of a contribution rather than a question on my side. I just wanted to add that the dealers in the Caribbean, well, I can speak for St. Lucia, they have started training their technicians to ensure effective maintenance of the vehicles that they have coming in, that relate specifically to the electric vehicles. So customers can be rest assured that the vehicles will be sufficiently maintained for a warranty throughout the warranty period and past the warranty period. As it relates to communications, myself and our project, the GEF7 project and the GIZ, we have been working very closely, and both projects do have a communications team, and we will be working rigorously to ensure that the information is out there so that individuals can be sufficiently informed as to what the benefits of shifting to electric vehicles come with. So I just wanted to add that. So in terms of worrying about maintenance, I believe our dealers outside of individuals who import vehicles have the capacity to maintain these electric vehicles once they have been sold and are on our roads.
Thank you, Nissa, for that intervention. I saw Kareem lowered his hand. Do you still have an intervention, or should I move on to Mr. Hussein? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Hussein.
Hi, Mr. Antonio. No, I would just like to support your initiative on Cantor and the TVET Council, all the entities across the Caribbean, and even to Ms. Alexander. So I know the person that asked the question, and I don't mind helping and getting it because I am one of the beneficiaries, and you know you're there in Sir Arthur Lewis training. And like I said, and even like you said as well, the training is to develop the whole CARICOM countries in technician salaries in their career, their entrepreneurship, getting those vehicle service maintained, and even to recycle parts. So I think it's a very good thing in Louisiana with Cantor. The website, you can even check for persons who didn't know. Cantor website, there is the occupational standard, and as Mr. Antonio mentioned, there will be some getting into the higher level for the NVQ and the CVQ level. So it's a good approach, it's a good initiative. There are other persons on the meeting right now who actually put forward more so that technician can benefit from it. So the awareness is there. I do support in getting it more shared across the Caribbean countries, so all the Caribbean countries could be at the same platform at the same time. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much. Redirecting a little bit. I want to maximize Angelica's time, then I'll take some more of the questions from the chat. Could you speak a little bit on the interim storage? I know you said that this is something that you think is absolutely needed to be aligned with the recommendations of the Basel Convention. I remember from reviewing the reports, this could take different shapes. This could be like a big permanent facility. This could also be a containerized solution, which I think might be very much more applicable for our region. Could you talk a little bit about what that interim storage facility could look like for a small island developing state?
Sorry, I think I lost you.
Oh, sorry
because
about
I
that.
didn't hear everything.
Right. So my question was around the interim storage. I know this is an important component. I wanted you to just speak a little bit on what that could look like for a small island developing state. I remember from reviewing the report, there were some containerized solutions that could be applicable and that sort of stuff. If you could just speak a little bit on what that could look like for the Caribbean context, I think that would be good for us to discuss a little bit. So just give a little bit on what that interim storage could be.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Yes, there are some containers that are specifically designed for this kind of applications, but also in the BCRC website, there is a really specific case study. In case you want to check, I can put the link here, because they basically develop the case study for an interim storage in Antigua. Basically because, and they are based in other island contexts like Cyprus and Mauritius. for the interim storage of hazardous waste, no? Because this is not just for batteries. When you usually build your interim storage, it's in general for hazardous waste. But basically, there are certain technical requirements that will need to be fulfilled. I didn't go in detail for it, but basically, you will need to have the floors. The floors will be ready. That you will need a proper segregation system. There are some rules to what kind of e-waste can go together. You will need air circulation systems, impermeable floors. You will need also, in the case of the batteries that they have their electrolyte, you will need to have them contain to prevent that these acid or bases get drained into our water system. You will need also to racks to store them, and there are certain standards on how many floors you can have per type of waste. But this is basically all specified in the Basel Convention guidelines in how to build your facility. Yes.
Okay, thanks for that. Conscious of the time, thanks everyone for joining and staying a little bit longer. I'll ask one more question, then I'll take Tekla's intervention. But I think we're at least 10 minutes over, so appreciate everyone for staying beyond the time. So my last question is on EPR. I see that being one of the big recommendations coming out of the work. And I just wanted you to talk a little bit about EPR. What is EPR for persons that might not understand, and just give a quick little intervention there on EPR. Yeah.
Yes, basically EPR is because currently how is working the waste management system. It is finance for our governments, no? But basically with our national budgets, that the last priority, of course, will be the waste management, and that's when we start developing public crisis, because we don't have the budget to manage our waste. But then when you think in an EPR approach, then the responsibility for financing and handling the end-of-life components will be transferred to the producers. And in the case of the CARICOM countries, mainly to the importers, because we don't have really producers of electrical vehicles or renewable energy components in the CARICOM. So we basically have importers. And in that case, it will require that these importers, producers, pay for what they will be responsible for the whole life cycle of the components and systems that they put into our market. That it's not just going to include to bring it and put it into the market, but also to think, what are you going to do, how you are going to contribute to handle this element when it comes to the end of life. And then that's when we start thinking in EPR fees, and this fee should cover what it costs to the country, to the supply chain, to handle this component at the end of their life in an environmental zone management. So in the case of the CARICOM country, okay, now we just can afford to have a proper interim storage and to export this kind of facility to hazardous waste. Then how much is costing to the country to do this collection, aggregation, storage, and export, and these costs should be passed to the producer rather than being the country. And that's why the e-waste management is not a financial sustainable system nowadays, because our countries don't have the budget to think in ways. And then when you pass the responsibilities to the ones putting the elements in the market, then we will have like a financial fund to subsidize and finance our e-waste management operators. You know, that's basically the concept of EPR.
Okay, thank you very much. Tekla, please come in with your question.
Okay, hi. Thank you, Antonio. Good morning, everybody. Thank you, Angelica. So during your presentation, one of your findings is that public awareness on this issue is low. So I have some concerns about the fact that we are just studying this type of technology and this use of EV cars and hybrid cars. And this is a government to government assistance from the government of Germany to those countries in CARICOM. At what stage do you think public awareness is critical? Because I think public awareness is critical and it should be at the start. I recognize that one of the Jeff colleagues was saying that there's some awareness being done, but I don't think there's any aggressive public awareness campaign on the impact of EV batteries, whether it's on the positive impact, bringing down reducing environmental impacts. People are buying EV cars, and I'm not sure if they know why. I'm assuming the reason we buy EV cars is just because it's a new thing on the market, and perhaps have a fuel bill, or we will have less of a fuel bill. I really think public awareness is becoming more and more critical. So my question to you, I'm not sure if you can answer, or anyone else in the meeting can answer. When will a public awareness campaign be critical? When? At what stage?
Well, I think first we will need at least the governing to become clear in some concepts, and that it's something that I will suggest, because if even the ones who will develop the awareness campaigns are not clear in what are the concepts, what are the risks for inaction, how we are gonna transmit the message. So I will say this is how we will need to start to clarify concepts and risk. But after that, and I think that has been a little bit the success here in Europe, it's to sense to to for the civilians to develop this awareness. And I think it's critical, because then these kind of measures will be requested by the civilians itself, because as you mentioned, nowadays what the CARICOM countries are doing, and most of the countries are doing, is to incentivize that these kind of systems enter to our countries, because of course we know it helps to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions and so on. But then, because now we are not facing the problem of the e-waste that will come out of it, at least not in a massive way, we are not still aware of the hazards that it represents. But it's pretty interesting, because we don't think like what will happen in case of the electrical vehicles it's involved in an accident, because we are conducting also a similar project in Egypt, and they had like 2 weeks ago an accident where an electrical vehicle was involved, and now they don't know who is going to be responsible for collecting, packaging, and export that battery, because that's something that has not been standardized so far. And Egypt is one of the main importers in the whole Africa for electric vehicles, no? But that's something that we are not used to think at the long-term consequences, but now these are not long-term. This is something that can be today consequence. And that's what I think one of the activities that we propose is to create this civilian self-awareness, no?
Yeah.
But first
Yeah.
we need to clarify some things, some rules, some regulations, I would say.
Yeah, you raise a great point. I think some of it is a little bit of cultural differences. Unfortunately, we don't have huge environmental activism here in the region like in Europe. I think there are huge lobbies for environmental friendliness and consciousness in Europe. And unfortunately, our culture is not similar in that regard. So Yeah, we need to do a lot more work in terms of encouraging persons to prioritize these things. But I think a culture gets involved there a little bit because I don't think the government would get as much pressure from the civilians on these types of issues, unfortunately. So it has to be done strategically from our side of things to kind of encourage these things because I don't think it would be huge political pressure, unfortunately, in some instances. But yeah. So yes, I think we are at the end of this session. I would like to take this time to thank Angelica for putting together a wonderful presentation and also for her support in executing this initiative. It was a lot of coordination, a lot of work, a lot of stakeholder engagement, a lot of conversations and analysis, data collection and stuff. So kudos to Angelica and the team at Black Forest Solutions. Also, kudos to our stakeholders in all the countries supporting us, all of our partner ministries and stuff that would have supported us in doing this work. I think it's very useful work that could be beneficial to the wider Caribbean because, again, even though we did these specific case studies in these countries, some of the other islands share similar contents. So thank you very much. I'm going to hand over to Brian, who's going to have a little conversation on some of the other sessions in the webinar series before we close.
Okay, thank you very much, Antonio and Angelica, and especially to the GIZ for facilitating the webinar today. To our attendees, I would like to say thank you for joining us and your active participation. On Thursday, the 30th of November, we have our third webinar, which looks at incentive mechanisms for electric mobility, with the case studies in Grenada, Jamaica, and St. Lucia. Our presenter will be Dr. Curtis Boudou. He's an energy consultant working for the GIZ. So until then, see you all, and I trust that you have a very productive week.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone, and have a good day.
Thank you. Have a good day.
All right. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Okay, bye, everybody.